and welcome to an extremely special interview for VIT Today. My name is Sarthak and with me is Abhishek Sudke, and we'll be interviewing the Honorable former Lieutenant Governor of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Lieutenant General A.K. Singh. Sir served as the former Commander-in-Chief of the Southern Command and was also was given additional responsibility as Administrator of Pondicherry. While serving as Lieutenant Governor, Sir has contributed majorly for the welfare of the island, even after his retirement, and we look forward to discussing the role of the Army and also his role as the Lieutenant Governor. Extremely humbled to have you on the show, sir.
Well, Sarthak, thank you. The pleasure is mine. My greetings to all the faculty and students of VIT. It's a very prestigious institution. And when I was in Pondicherry, I didn't visit your institute, but I did visit Vellore a couple of times and I have fond memories of that visit.
Thank you so much, sir. We look forward to having you in our institute as well. So we want to start off this conversation by perhaps one of the most iconic reforms to the defense sector we've seen in the last 60 years, the addition of the Chief of Defense Staff. I wanted to start by getting your thought on what this addition looks like and what is the responsibility like to add the role of a Chief of Defense Staff to our service.
Sarthak, you know, the three services of the Indian Armed Forces, the Army, Navy, Air Force, are individually very capable, and they have proved that in most of the operations that they have conducted, including the 1971 war, a very decisive war, the Kargil operations, and the ongoing proxy war and subconventional operations. But in the 21st century, there are threats and challenges have become very, very complex. And it is not possible for individual services to deal with them in isolation. What is required is a combined response from the three services. And while the three services have had functional mechanisms to work together, they were not optimal. And a need had been felt since quite some time to have a coordinating authority in the form of a Chief of Defense Staff. And this came out very starkly during the Kargil operations. And in the K. Subramaniam committee, this was highly recommended. And a number of other committees actually said the same thing. When our Honorable Prime Minister took office on 26 May 2014, I called on him in the beginning of June, and apart from briefing him on the Andamans, I also briefed him on defense issues, which I thought were important. And I recollect two of the major issues that I did say to him. One was, of course, the establishment of a war memorial, and the second was the appointment of a Chief of Defense Staff. And it's to the credit of the Honorable Prime Minister that he has taken action and completed both these issues, a pledge that he had made to the nation on taking over. Now the Chief of Defense Staff has been appointed as a 4-star general or equivalent when he happens to be from the Air Force Navy. The present one is General Bipin Rawat from the Army. And he will be wearing a number of hats. The first hat that he wears is the chairman, permanent chairman, Joint Chief of Staff Committee, where the three chiefs meet and take combined decisions. Earlier, one of the chiefs, the senior most, used to preside. But now we will have a separate entity in the form of the permanent chairman, Chief of Staff. The second role of the CDS is that he is also the head of the Directorate of Military Affairs. As you are aware, the Ministry of Defense has been bifurcated into two, and most operational and military kind of issues have been put under the DMA, and the CDS will head it. The DMA will be staffed both by bureaucrats and service officers. But the most important role that the CDS will have is that of a single point advice to the Raksha Mantri. and as and when required to the Honorable Prime Minister and the Cabinet Committee on Security. It's not that the chiefs will lose their role. The chiefs will remain responsible for the operational tasks, and they will have direct access also to both the Raksha Mantri and, if and when required, to the Prime Minister. The CDS has also been given a number of tasks, and one of the main tasks is to ensure jointness, both in capability development as well as procurement. He will be responsible for ushering in the theatre commands, joint or tri-service theatre commands, which will unfold in the next 2-3 years. So in my opinion, it's actually a very, very monumental decision to appoint a Chief of Defence Staff. These are early days, and as the Chief of Defence Staff matures, I think we will find that the combined capabilities and the jointness of the three services will multiply manyfold. And I think it will become a game changer in the security dimension of our country.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir. My name is Abhishek, and just a follow-up question to your answer. Now, the entirety of strategic community in the Indian Armed Forces believes that integration of military into the policy making structures, such through the establishment of a chief of defense staff, would be extremely important to solve the institutional problems that exist in the realm of national security for our country. But at the same time, most of our institutions, military institutions, which train the leaders and which will train the future leaders as well, lack the foundations or lack the infrastructure to train them in the domains of economics and in the domain of international relations. So how what is your view on this with respect to how can this be made better so that the CDS is a more robust mechanism and can solve the institutional problems in national security?
Yes, joint training is a key objective of the CDS. But Abhishek, you are not very correct in saying what you said. In fact, the Indian Armed Forces have one of the most extensive training curriculums that we have anywhere in the country. And let me give you an example. These days, I'm an advisor to General Global University, and I also teach an elective subject there on national security, military strategy and governance. And I find that the training methodology, pedagogy in the armed forces is very, very modern and up to the standards. Let me give you my own example. Apart from doing many training courses specific to my work, I'm a cavalry officer, so on the tanks. As a colonel, I did a higher command course, which also included an MPhil. And that took us to the operational realm of what threats and challenges we face and how we were meeting them, not only on land, but land, air, and sea. And thereafter, as a brigadier, I got selected and went and did the National Defense College course at Delhi. Now, National Defense College course is one of the most highly structured courses, which gives you an overall view of strategic affairs and governance, and in specific international affairs. So one was lucky to be there for 1 year, and you not only got a government view there, but also got the anti-view. So you developed a very rounded vision of the complete security perspective. In my case, I've been fortunate that at a young service of about 6 years, I spent 1 year in the Tank Academy in Moscow in 79-80, where we were taught all the ingredients up to a very high level. And then was fortunate to attend my staff college. You know, we have a staff college exam when you are around 12-13 years service. As a major, is one of the toughest exams. And having topped that exam, I was detailed to do my staff college, not at Wellington in Tamil Nadu, but at Kimberley in UK. So I'm probably one of the very few officers who has trained both in Warsaw Pact and NATO at the height of Cold War. So I think the armed forces have a very structured training. Yes, you have a point, and now looking back, I can say that while we train well, I think we need to also prepare our officers, and you can
Right,
then
sir.
mix and match. So Abhishek, as I was saying,
Yes, sir.
are we ready to start?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are rolling, sir.
Okay. So Abhishek, having said what I have, let me say that the armed forces need to concentrate a little more on developing knowledge as is relevant today. And there, particularly, social sciences have become very important because warfare and conflict is directly related to the people, whether it is external or internal. And hence, we have to develop such skills, whether it is language, culture, understanding of various entities. That is something that the armed forces are working on.
Right, sir. So this brings us to our next question. We wanted to drift a little bit away from your career as an decorated officer to your role as the administrator and the lieutenant governor of Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So we wanted to understand how that shift was from, say, commanding as a general and then serving the people as the lieutenant governor, as an administrator. How was the shift from the army to public service like?
Well, I was very fortunate in being picked up for this very, very challenging role as the Lieutenant Governor cum administrator of Andaman Nicobar Islands. They are a very, very challenging place. 608 islands spread over 750 kilometers. Out of these 600 plus islands, only 37 are inhabited. So you can imagine the security dimension of looking after such a huge place. They lie about 1200 kilometers away from the mainland. Not only we have a population around 4 lakh of settlers from various places, but we also have 5 of the most primitive tribal groups there. And then environment. It is one of the most pristine hotspots in our country, not only in our country, in the world. So one had to ensure that each of these centers of gravity got their due. Now, let me tell you that once I arrived there, I was given a lot of advice by people that please be careful. You're going to be dealing with civil, with the bureaucrats, and it's not like the army. But let me share, for me, it was another assignment. And I really followed what I did in the army. Yes, there were some differences, but those differences I could take in my stride. So my leadership style was to look at an issue, consult a large number of people, and once I had arrived at a decision, then ensure that that decision was carried through. There was no dichotomy between what I thought, what I said, and what I wanted done. It took a little time for the civil people to understand, especially the bureaucrats. But soon, in fact, after 6 months, no, it was 4 or 5 months, my chief secretary came to me and said, "Sir, we have now understood you and it's such a pleasure." And the whole team was a great support. Yes, there are critical differences between how you run the army. In the army, the responsibility, authority, and accountability is clearly established. Now, that is very, very vague in the civil services. There is very little accountability. And so, first thing I had to do was to establish accountability. The second difference I felt was that in the armed forces, when you get a task, it's not just a job, it's your passion. You get involved with that task and you ensure that you do it to the best of your ability. On the civil side, especially the civil administration, it's just another job, another file. And so there was a little issue initially. And slowly I could instill this work attitude and set targets for them, made them accountable. And I'm glad to say and very proud to say that the team that I had both in Andaman Nicobar and Pondicherry was able to deliver, and in their own words, much more than they had ever delivered. I'll give you an example. Andaman wanted a medical college because there are very few doctors come there, and we all felt that if we had a medical college, we will get a lot of teaching staff, and our own students will become doctors. We used to, till I came, we used to get about 8 seats in the medical colleges around the country. So I decided to establish a medical college. There was so much opposition from the vested interests, but I persisted. They took the opposition right to the highest level of the Prime Minister. But I did not budge because I followed 2 things. It was in the interest of the islands. I was very sure. I had no personal interest. And second thing, that I did not want anything for myself. And I'm proud to say that Andaman College, Medical College is fully functional. The first batch is graduating. And instead of 8 students, Andaman with a small population of 4 lakhs plus actually has 94 students in the medical college every year, year after year. So you can see the change that came about. And there are many more instances. In fact, if any of you were to ever go to Andaman, you can talk to anyone and they would certainly remember me and the work that we did very fondly. Now, Pondicherry was a different, Puducherry. Pondicherry is the capital, Puducherry is the UT. That was a different kettle of fish. Because in Andaman, I was the sole authority. All decisions, all authority vested in me. And in some cases, for financial powers beyond mine, I had to go to the Home Ministry or the Finance Ministry. But in Puducherry, we had a chief minister, we had a cabinet, same issue as Delhi. And my predecessor had to leave because there was a rift between him and the chief minister and the chief secretary. So when I reached there, 2 UTs I handled for 2 years together. They were almost 1,500 kilometers apart. So I was based in Andaman, but I used to visit Pondicherry almost twice a month. And I developed a very, very good rapport with the chief minister. And he's still a friend, Mr. Rangasamy. And, we were very clear. I told him, Mr. Rangasamy, I have worked with a certain ethos all my life, always done the right thing and never done anything that is wrong. So it'll be difficult for me to agree to anything that is not as per the law. You show me the way how it can be done and I shall do it. I do understand. I told him that I do understand that you are in politics and sometimes people come to you with unfair expectations. I said, you can pass the buck on to me and let me be the fall guy. I will say no. So I think I developed a very good rhythm both in Andaman Nicobar as well as Pondicherry. And I have very fond memories of both these temples.
That's great, sir. That is great to hear. Now, I would like to know your perspective more about India's foreign policy. So, for our country, the main troubles with our neighborhood policy is that China has time and again provided huge amounts of money to these countries through their economic, trade, and commercial purposes. And these countries go on to become an asset for China because in a lot of situations, these countries cannot pay China back. And so China uses its policy of debt trap diplomacy to make these countries an asset or a pseudo asset for China itself. Now, India has time and again stressed that its foreign policy is very strictly based on the concept of soft power, and it will keep utilizing the same. So, what is your take on this? Do you believe that we need a change in our foreign policy with respect to this, or do we continue this with some amendments?
That's a very vast question, but let me start. Let me start with China. China is a great emerging power. And what is their worldview? What is their world ambition? They want a bipolar world, 2 poles, one with United States, second with China. But they want a unipolar Asia. Only 1 pole in Asia, and that is China. And the only country that can challenge them somewhat is India. And therefore, it has been China's overall policy to tie India down within the subcontinent. And how have they done it? Exactly what you were saying. You would have heard of the string of pearls, and now they have the CPEC corridor in the north. So they have established economic and other military and other relations with bulk of the countries in our neighborhood, and using various means. And some of those countries at times have taken positions which are not in harmony with that of India. Of course, Pakistan is the main culprit there. And there is a in tandem relationship that exists between Pakistan and China. So, while India's foreign policy is stated to be neighbors first, India has reached out to neighbors. The neighbors also understand that they have to live with it. And India understands that for India to rise, our neighbors must also prosper. India cannot prosper alone if all the countries in our neighborhood are not prospering. So minor hiccups are there. These relationships keep going down but improve. We have excellent relations with a large number of our neighbors. But yes, there is always a factor that China tends to, and Pakistan tends to vitiate the atmosphere. So far, if you recollect, on independence, we followed a policy of non-alignment. That means we were not aligned to either bloc, either NATO or Warsaw Pact. Around 71, we had drifted closer to the Soviet Union, and we had a 20-year security pact with them because the Americans rebuffed us. But generally, we were walking the center of the line. And after the demise of the Soviet Union, we are following a policy of omni-alignment. That means we will align with whoever for a particular issue where our interests lie. Therefore, you'll find we have excellent relations, growing partnership with the United States. We have good relations with France, UK, with Russia. And even we thought, a vibrant relationship with China, with Japan, with a whole lot of other countries. But I think this policy of running with the hares and hunting with the hounds is now come to question. The Chinese have actually given us a lesson which I think will force us to re-look at our foreign policy. I don't think we will find major realignments in our foreign policy, but we will be more circumspect in deciding who are our friends, who are neutral, and who are the adversaries. And therefore, you could see temporary partnerships and alignments with those countries which are our close friends. For example, in the Indo-Pacific, you have this grouping called the Quadrilateral, which includes the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. So far, it was quite low-key. But I think in light of what is happening with China and the COVID threat, which also emanated from China, I think we will see a more formal emergence of this group. So that is the route which I see foreign policy taking in the future. For we must remember that finally India has to remember that when it comes to the crunch for your own security, India will have to be prepared to stand up alone if required. Finally, and therefore, we not only need a dynamic foreign policy, we also need a very capable military.
Definitely, sir. So, as you pointed out, the quadrilateral security dialogue. So, until now, the Quad partnership has primarily been a dialogue on the foreign ministers level across the last 10 years when it was started in 2007. So, in light of the entire COVID situation where China has threatened a lot of nations in South China Sea, especially Japan, and has not been on the greatest terms with Australia, do you believe it is now time for India to institutionalize the quadrilateral security dialogue as a organization or some sort of a solid partnership?
I think there is some merit in what you are saying. Individually, India has a very vibrant relationship with all the other three members of the Quad. With US, we have a number of agreements, including virtually a strategic partnership. We've just signed a mutual agreement on security and logistics with Australia. We have a very vibrant relationship with Japan. So far, India was a little reluctant because India didn't want this grouping to acquire an anti-China tone. But now I think the pieces of the chessboard have been shaken out. And I certainly see the Quad becoming more important. I choose my words carefully. I see it becoming more important, more meaningful, and more robust. What form it will take, whether it will take the form of a formal alliance or a consultative platform, or will the profile be raised from foreign ministers to that of heads of state, we'll have to wait and watch. But certainly the Quad is a very good grouping, not only of these four countries. In the future, I also see a number of like-minded friends, other countries also joining up in some capacity.
Right, sir. So that brings us to probably one of the last questions and also the most debatable question of this interview. It's about the situation that happened at Galwan. Now, we don't want to presume that we know anything because there's very little that the government has released. But going by what we have known, probably the most iconic move that is happening is the meetings of the Lieutenant Governor from India and their equivalent from China at the border. And this is one of the most iconic meetings because a meeting at this level has never happened between the two countries. Do you think this meeting between our Lieutenant Governor and their equivalent general is because of the gravity of the situation that we have and that is so bad at the border right now that such high powers have to be involved? Or is this because we want to calm the situation quicker? What is your take on this meeting as such and in general the situation at Galwan right now?
Sarthak, it's not Lieutenant Governor, that's Lieutenant General, the Corps Commander,
Sorry,
who's based in
my
Delhi,
apologies,
and his
Lieutenant General.
That's
Right,
just
sir.
a minor correction. Let's get some facts right. India and China share a border almost 3,500 plus kilometers, starting from Ladakh, running through Himachal, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh. We all are aware that the border is not demarcated in the proper sense, and there are large number of perceptional disputes based on historical facts and each country's assessment of where the border lies. There were some agreements between British India and Tibet at that time, which are recognized by India but not recognized by China. So over the last 25 years, we have termed it the line of actual control, LAC, and a number of protocols had been established where peace and tranquility and confidence building measures could be in place to avoid any face-off. You are aware that in 62 we fought war with China. 67 there was again in Sikkim there was a face-off and loss of casualties also in 75. But because of these various protocols, generally the border has been managed. But in Doklam, ever since 2013, so let me say that since 2013, China has been rather aggressive. And we've seen this aggression mainly in Ladakh. And you're all aware that in 2016, there was a face-off at Doklam, which is on the triangle of China, India, and Bhutan. And India stood up to China, and finally they had to retreat from there. Of course, they later on came again on a different alignment. So this time, the Chinese have intruded into the Indian perception of the grey zone at a number of points in Ladakh. And this started in April, May. And it was only in May that we started reacting. For some reason, we did not. We thought that the Chinese were just doing a normal exercise. And therefore, we now have a face-off from the north at the Dapsang plateau. Then we have at Galwan, where we also had a lot of casualties. We lost 20 people. The Chinese lost, in our assessment, many more. Then we have at Hot Spring and Gogra. And finally, we have a face-off at Pengangso Lake, where we were occupying till finger 4, they were occupying till finger 8, and between 4 and 8, a distance of some kilometers, both sides used to patrol. They have now come and parked themselves and taken up positions at finger 4. And so, obviously, there is an intrusion into what we perceive to be an area which we claim. And I think this time it is rather serious. And let me be quite blunt in saying that this is a very calculated, it is not a localized kind of thing. This is a very calculated move by China for many reasons. And we understand those reasons. Of course, on the ground, the tactical reason is to nibble away at key territory. They have obviously got alarmed with the kind of infrastructure that India has been making and therefore wanted to disrupt that. Now, at the moment, the Indian Army has confronted them and they are not able to proceed further. But the whole issue is that at a number of places, they have come into our area or an area which is disputed. And therefore, what we want is a status quo ante to be restored as it existed in April before they moved their troops. Let me say both sides, apart from face-to-face confrontation, we also have moved, the Chinese have moved a large number of troops in the rear, and so has the Indian Army. And therefore, while the script was written by the Chinese, as I said in one of my other videos and interviews, that there are two players to the script. One is China and the second is India. And therefore, in a tense situation, the script can go off as it went off in Galwan. And you will see that I hope the Chinese have realized that it is not the India of 1962. This is the India and Indian Armed Forces of 2020. And we will give them a befitting reply for every adverse move that they will make. I hope cooler heads will prevail on the Chinese side. India is keen not to expand this into a proper conflict. But if the Chinese carry out aggressive moves, then I'm afraid that we will be ready to match them blow for blow. And I hope it doesn't come to that. Now, to resolve this issue, there are a number of channels that have been opened up. One is, of course, the diplomatic channel, but more on the ground. Diplomatic channel can at the best talk of peace and things like that. But on the ground, it is the military commanders who have to sit down on a map and decide how they will disengage and withdraw to the April positions. And therefore, there have been meetings at the Corps Commander level. On this Monday, this was the third meeting. After the 6th June meeting in Galwan, they were supposed to withdraw. They didn't. So when Colonel Babu and his team went to verify, they in fact acted very treacherously. And therefore, the trust that was built over decades has been lost. India is not going to accept their word anymore. And for every decision that is taken, we will want to verify. And therefore, as I see, while the chances of escalation cannot be ruled out, I hope this will cool down and that over a period of time, we will be able to disengage. The moot question remains that the Chinese cannot be allowed to retain the territory that does not belong to them and have to fall back to the position that was existing before April. If they agree, then I see this cooling off and disengagement and other things happening over a period of time. It is not going to be overnight, but may take weeks and months. But if the Chinese become adamant and don't move out from that area, then I really don't know how the situation will evolve. Because India is also not going to accept the kind of fait accompli that those people are wanting to present to us. So it's a tense situation. I think the nation has the political will and the military capability to defend our territory, and more important, to defend our honor. So I can assure all countrymen and all the students. And
thank you for that answer. But I wanted to understand a bit. You spoke precisely about the Chinese progression at our borders, and also about the relations we have had and how we have lost our decades work with them because we have lost trust between each other. Keeping that in mind, do you think that we should be taking the doctrine such as a string of pearl theory, as you stated before, a little more seriously? Initially, our attitude towards these progressions wasn't as actively dealt with as we are dealing with at the border. But seeing such aggression from the Chinese side, do you think we should be taking every strategic move now a little more seriously than we were before Galwan?
Sarthak, it's not that we didn't take them seriously. As a policy and as a view, we realize that India and China are neighbors. You cannot do away with that. And it's best to live in peace and cooperation with each other. And I think India also understands, and we had hoped that China will understand, that there is adequate space for both India and China to grow. So it's not that one can grow at the expense of the other. And therefore, India showed a lot of understanding for the concerns of the Chinese. As you can see, even on the economic front, there is an adverse trade between India and China. The Chinese need to do much more in India than what they have been doing. There is an adverse balance of payment and trade. We had been quite accommodative, and we had hoped that the Chinese will understand this and respond. Unfortunately, the Chinese in some way may have misconstrued this as a compulsion, weakness. I really don't know. Only time will tell. But certainly with their moves, anti-India moves, not only on the line of actual control, but some of the positions that they have taken in international forums like the United Nations. I mean, they have backed Pakistan's case on a number of occasions, including when United Nations wanted to declare Masood Azhar as a terrorist. China vetoed it. Even when we bifurcated J&K into two UTs and abrogated Article 370, again China took it up on Pakistan's behalf. So I think they have taken up positions, including in the nuclear suppliers group. They have taken an anti-India position. And so I think the trust that has been lost over the last few years certainly will take quite some time to rebuild. And that rebuilding cannot be a one-way street. It will have to be done by both countries. So China will have to take a step forward to ensure that India now regains that trust which has been lost, and it will be some time before that happens.
So it was great hearing from you about these situations that we are facing today. But we wanted to conclude on a lighter note. So would you like to share an incident from one of your postings in the armed forces with us?
Well, there are many anecdotes, but some of them can't be shared. But let me share an anecdote from a very younger days when I was a young captain. I had just come back from Russia after doing a 1-year training on the tanks and on strategy and operational art and tactics. And one of the specialized training that I had sort of undergone was deep fording with T-72 tanks. My regiment, 7th Cavalry, was the first one to get these tanks. And deep fording is an ability of this tank, T-72 and now T-90, to go underwater for up to 5 meters. And so I, along with 2 other members of my regiment, had been trained. And so somewhere near Jhansi, there's a place called Babina, which is a big cantonment. We were tasked to give a demonstration to the hierarchy of the Indian Army. And it had to be done in monsoon when the lakes were full. So we chose a place where the water the depth did not exceed 5 meters. And there were no obstructions on the bed, boulders, etc. It was a risky proposition because this was the first time it was being done in India. And not just one tank. I took my whole squadron of 14 tanks through that. I trained them and took them through. In case a tank stalled underwater, the rescue and other arrangements that should be there was slightly sketchy, but all the same. So when the VIPs were sitting across the lake and we started doing, normally when you go into the water, you put the tank in first gear. So there is a high RPM. So the tank goes slowly and comes out from the other side. So I told my driver, of course, my commanding officer was aware of it. I told my driver, okay, put second gear, and I told him to put third gear. A bit risky because it could stall. Now, when we did this, the speed increased and there was an artificial wave that was created in the lake. And the VIPs who were sitting just on the edge of the lake, as the tanks came out from the side, that wave actually went right over them and they were all drenched. But that was just not that. The funny part was that to celebrate this occasion, a cake had been ordered and that cake had been fetched from Jhansi for the occasion so that we could celebrate. But when the time came for that cake to be cut, there was no cake. And later it transpired that while everybody was mesmerized and watching this spectacle, one of the dogs in the neighborhood had come and eaten away the cake. But anyway, this thing was a grand success. I was awarded, me and my 2 crew, that time Lance Daftar Mali and Daftar Vasant Singh. All 3 of us were awarded Chief of Army Staff Commendation. So just one of those anecdotes. There are many more. There was another anecdote when I was in military operations as a colonel, just before Operation Parakram. And there was a presentation made to the chief, then General Padmanabhan, on the alarming state of tank ammunition. And so in the presentation, the Master General Ordnance assured the chief that all will be well and we will get adequate supply soon. So General Padmanabhan had a wry sense of humor and he said it out loud. So, gentlemen, you are telling your chief that I need not take a discipline as yet. And everybody laughed. But I was sitting in the rear row. There were only generals there. I was a colonel. So as we were about to move to the next agenda point, I raised my voice. I said, sir, there's something I want to say. So he said, come in front. So I went up. And of course, my immediate bosses were quite amazed as to what I was going to say. And what I said to the chief was this, and it is recorded. I said, sir, I totally agree that the chief need not take a discipline as yet. But as your director, MO5, responsible for the operational capability of the Indian Army, I would suggest that you keep a discipline and a glass of water close by to your bedside and on your office table. And there was stunned silence. Of course, General Padmanabhan was very kind. He said, yeah, please explain. I said, sir, the solution that is being provided to you is the problem. It is about quality control. Now, how do we know? They may produce another 100,000 rounds of tank ammunition, but if they don't pass muster, then we'd be back to square one. So many anecdotes like that. I hope these suffice.
Right, sir. That was really engaging. So, in conclusion, so saying that we're in university editorial and our viewers are also university students, do you have any feedback for the viewers, mostly students from 18 to 22, who are going to be taking up jobs and probably entering the services and giving their exams, or probably going for further studies? Any feedback for the students?
See, I've had the good fortune to now be engaged with a large number of students in Jindal Global University. As you are aware, JGU has broken into the top 750 universities world rankings. It is one of the youngest, the topmost youngest university in our country in world rankings, and is the only university which is social science oriented to break into those. Normally, you have bulk of the universities have sciences, medical, engineering, and all that. So it has been a very engrossing journey, and I quite enjoy taking my elective on national security, military strategy, and governance, which is very popular. And I've taken 3-4 of those. I take one every semester. And let me say that the students that I have come across, and that must be the same at VIT, are a more vibrant lot than what we used to be. And they are very clear-headed in where they want to go. Certainly, a little bit of guidance is required, which to help him make up his mind. And I think each university has a mechanism. I'm sure the VIT also has that. And all that I would say is that today the world is yours. It's open. Set your sights and you will reach there. There are so many avenues when a person passes out from General Global University. I mean, he or she has so many avenues to choose from. And don't be afraid. Let me say, what is the difference I find from our time to the youth of today? In our time, we were slightly, जैसे हिंदी में कहते हैं ना, थोड़ा सहमे सहमे रहते थे, थोड़ा डरे हुए रहते थे. And the whole thing was, I hope something doesn't go wrong. Let me do it rightly. Always worried. But the youth of today, the ethos is different. It's far more positive. And the youth says, I can, I shall, I will. I think that is the ethos. Whatever you want to do. And please do not be afraid to take a offbeat path. If you like that, then that is the place you must go to. And certainly I would recommend to a large number of you in VIT, the armed forces offer one of the most dynamic and enjoyable and service-oriented careers that you could look for, where you get a chance not only to meet challenging situations, but also serve your motherland.
Thank you so much, sir.
On that great note, we would like to conclude our interview. So thank you so much for being with us and talking with us. It was really lovely having you here, and we really respect your giving us your time. And we hope we can do this again very soon at a better time and on a better day. And thank you so much for being here for us. Thank you.